Who are you to decide what I do with my body? My fiancée snapped in front of my parents when I joked about future kids. 3 weeks later, I gave her my answer. Sup Reddit. I'm Brian, 29 male. Grab your popcorn because this one's a ride. 3 years with Caroline. Thinking we were building something unshakable. We met at a friend's housewarming party, bonded over our mutual hatred of small talk and overpriced appetizers, and spent the next 3 years becoming the couple that other couples pointed to as proof that relationships could actually work. Same page on the big stuff. Career timelines, where we wanted to live. Kids eventually, probably two, starting in our early 30s when we had more money saved and more stability locked in. Looking back, she had weird moments around baby stuff. If a friend announced a pregnancy, she'd smile and then get quiet. And anytime the talk got specific, she'd steer it back to, "We've got time." I read it as practical. I was wrong. We had a running joke about naming our hypothetical son after my dad's childhood dog, this golden retriever named Chester. She'd pretend to hate it. I'd pretend to insist. We'd argue about it over breakfast like it was a real disagreement, both of us trying not to laugh. It was our thing, one of many things. Sunday morning breakfast at a diner near our apartment where the waitress knew our order before we sat down. Eggs over easy for me, avocado toast for her, coffee that never stopped refilling. Thursday night movie picks, alternating who chose, with veto power for anything involving puppets or excessive gore. A shared calendar color-coded by category that she'd set up and I'd actually learned to use. Inside jokes nobody else would understand. The kind of shorthand that develops when you spend years learning someone's rhythms, their moods, their tells. The engagement happened 8 months ago. I'd saved for the ring for a year, picking up extra weekend shifts at the distribution center where I worked as an operations supervisor. 14-hour days during peak season. Saturdays when other people were at barbecues. I told her I was helping a friend move. I told her I was catching up on paperwork. She never questioned it. She trusted me the way I trusted her. The ring cost about $8,000. Round-cut diamond, platinum band. I wanted her to look at it 50 years from now and still feel like it meant something. I proposed at Martinelli's, this little place we'd been going to since our third date. The owner, Sal, had watched our relationship develop over nearly 3 years of regular visits. He knew what we ordered. He knew our favorite booth. When I called to ask if I could propose there, he practically cried on the phone. Caroline cried when I got down on one knee. Sal brought out their signature tiramisu on the house. 2 spoons, the whole deal. Everything felt locked in. Certain. Like we'd been heading toward this exact moment since the day we met. Her parents were thrilled when we called them that night. Her mom screamed so loud I could hear it through the phone speaker. My parents were thrilled when we drove over the next morning to tell them in person. My mom cried and hugged Caroline for about 5 minutes straight. We started planning within a week, venue research, caterer tastings, DJ meetings. We were organized about it. We made spreadsheets. We set budgets. We divided responsibilities. This was how we worked, as a team, splitting the load, building something together. By the time of the dinner at my parents' house, we'd put down deposits totaling about $12,000. Venue booked for next October, a converted barn outside the city that Caroline had found on some wedding blog. She'd shown me the photos one night, her eyes bright with excitement. "Can you picture it?" she'd asked. I could. I really could. Catering was locked in. Photographer confirmed. DJ was some friend of a friend who gave us a good rate. My name was on most of the contracts since my credit score was better. We weren't keeping score. We were building a life. We'd been living together for 2 years in a 2-bedroom apartment I'd had before we met. Lease in my name. She paid her share of rent and utilities monthly through Venmo. Never missed a payment. Never asked for exceptions. We'd combined some things but kept others separate. Both our names were on the streaming accounts. Our own names on our own credit cards. A joint checking account for shared expenses that we both contributed to equally. It worked. We worked. I trusted her completely. That was the foundation everything else was built on. 3 years of her showing up, being present, building alongside me. I had no reason to doubt any of it. The dinner at my parents' house was supposed to be a celebration. My mom had been asking to do a proper engagement dinner for months. Something more formal than the backyard barbecue we'd thrown together right after the proposal. She wanted to cook her famous pot roast, use the good china that came out twice a year, make the kind of fuss she'd been waiting to make since I was old enough to date. My parents had been married 34 years. They understood commitment. They liked Caroline. My dad especially appreciated that she could hold a conversation about something other than herself, that she asked him about his woodworking projects, and actually remembered details weeks later. Caroline seemed fine with the dinner plan. A little distracted in the days leading up, but I chalked that up to work stress. She was an account manager at a mid-sized PR firm downtown, handling clients who seemed to exist in a permanent state of crisis. Her workload had been brutal lately. Plus, her sister Bailey had been in town for the past week. Bailey was what my dad would have called a piece of work. She lived in Austin and ran a podcast called Unshackled Woman that had about 40,000 subscribers and a very specific worldview. The general thesis was that women were systematically tricked into domestic servitude by society and should prioritize radical self-actualization over traditional milestones. Marriage was a trap designed by patriarchal systems. Motherhood was a trap that derailed careers and identities. Relationships were acceptable only if they served the woman's journey and could be terminated the moment they became inconvenient. I didn't hate Bailey. I just found her exhausting. Every conversation became a lecture. Every dinner became an opportunity to workshop material. The first time I met her 2 years ago, she'd asked if she could record our interaction for a segment on how women's partners respond to boundary setting. I'd said no thanks. She'd posted about it anyway, without my voice, but with her commentary about my defensive body language and performative reasonableness. One of her followers had found my LinkedIn and sent me a message calling me a classic covert narcissist. That should have been a warning sign. Bailey saw everything as content. Real life was just raw footage waiting to be edited into engagement metrics. The week before the dinner, she'd been staying at our place, sleeping on the pull-out couch, eating our groceries, monopolizing Caroline's attention. I'd come home a few times to find them huddled together, voices dropping when I walked in. Bailey had her phone out constantly, sometimes recording voice memos, sometimes just typing rapidly. Once I walked in and heard her say, "This is exactly what I mean," before noticing me and going quiet. I didn't think much of it. Sisters had private jokes. Bailey left 2 days before the dinner. On her way out, she'd hugged Caroline for a long time, whispering something I couldn't hear. Then she'd looked at me with an expression I couldn't read and said, "Take care of yourself, Brian." Weird phrasing, but I let it go. I was good at letting things go. The night of the dinner, we drove to my parents' place in the suburbs. 45 minutes of light traffic. The house smelled like my childhood when we walked in. Pot roast, lemon polish, old books on shelves that hadn't been reorganized since I was in middle school. For about 90 minutes, everything felt perfect. We ate, we laughed. My dad told embarrassing stories about my little league career. My mom asked about the wedding planning, and Caroline answered with what seemed like genuine enthusiasm. Then my mom asked about the future, grandchildren, not pushily, just warmly, curiously, the way moms do when they're imagining a next generation. I made a joke about cribs, a throwaway line I'd made a dozen times before without incident. Caroline's face changed, instantly, like a switch had been flipped somewhere behind her eyes. Her smile vanished. She set down her fork with a metallic click that silenced the entire room. "I never planned to be a mother," she said. Her voice was flat, completely stripped of the warmth she'd shown all evening. And I'd appreciate it if people stopped assuming that's on my agenda. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. My mom's face froze, caught between confusion and concern. My dad set down his fork slowly. I just sat there, trying to understand what had just come out of my fiancé's mouth. Caroline turned to me. Her eyes were hard. "We've never actually agreed on that, you know. You just assumed. You and everyone else. My body, my choice, my future, my decision. I'm not some incubator for your family's expectations." I looked at her, confused. "Caroline, I was just what? Just deciding my life for me? Just treating me like I'm here to fulfill some checklist your parents have been holding on to since you were born?" The words hit like a slap. In front of my parents. At a dinner meant to celebrate us. With a tone that suggested I'd been oppressing her for 3 years by occasionally mentioning the abstract concept of children. I looked at her, and for the first time since I'd known her, I didn't recognize the person looking back. My mom tried to smooth things over. Classic Zoe, always the peacemaker. She said something about how everyone's entitled to their own timeline, how things change, how she didn't mean to put pressure on anyone. My dad said nothing, just watched. Caroline took a breath. For a second, I thought she might apologize, might realize how badly this had landed, might try to walk it back. Instead, she doubled down. "I'm just tired of the performance," she said. "Tired of pretending I'm excited about things I'm not excited about. Tired of nodding along to conversations about nurseries and baby names like that's some inevitable destination I've agreed to." "We've talked about this," I said. My voice came out steady, which surprised me. "Multiple times. You said you wanted kids eventually. Maybe not right away, but someday. You said that, Caroline." Not me assuming. I said what I needed to say to avoid conflict. That's what women do. We accommodate. We perform. We say what people need to hear. The words landed with a weight she probably didn't intend. Or maybe she did. Either way, they clarified something I hadn't wanted to see. "So you've been lying to me." "I've been protecting my autonomy." I set my napkin on the table. stood up. I think we should go. Caroline looked surprised. Maybe she'd expected me to argue. Thank you for dinner, I said to my parents. It was excellent. I'm sorry about this. I collected Caroline's purse from the sideboard, stood by her chair, waited. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she stood up and walked toward the door without looking at my parents, without apologizing, without acknowledging that she'd just detonated something in the middle of their dining room. Behind me, I heard my mom start crying. I closed the door behind us. The drive home was 28 minutes of silence. Caroline sat with her arms crossed, radiating defensive energy, waiting for a fight I wasn't going to give her. Every few minutes, she'd make a small sound, a sigh or a huff, like she was preparing for confrontation. I didn't say a word. When we got home, she went straight to the bathroom. Long shower. The kind you take when you're avoiding someone or gathering your thoughts for battle. She came out 45 minutes later, sat in the chair across from me. You're not going to say anything? What would you like me to say? The conversation went in circles for an hour. She blamed me for putting her on the spot. I pointed out she'd ambushed my parents at their own table. She said she was finally being honest. I said she'd been lying for 3 years about something fundamental. At one point, I asked what she actually wanted from this relationship. Not what she thought she should want. Not what Bailey told her to want. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it. Her expression shifted. I want a partner who respects my choices without interrogating them. And I want a partner who doesn't hide fundamental life decisions until we're 8 months from a wedding. Seems like we both have things to think about. I slept in the bedroom. She slept on the couch. Her choice. I didn't sleep much, just lay there in the dark, running calculations I didn't want to run. The next morning felt like the first day after something broke, but before you figured out how badly. Caroline acted like nothing had happened. Made coffee, scrolled her phone, asked what I wanted for dinner like we hadn't just detonated something at my parents' table 12 hours earlier. I played along, went to work, came home, ate dinner in front of the TV. We moved around each other like strangers sharing an apartment, polite, distant, careful. 3 days in, I called James. James was my oldest friend. We'd met freshman year of college, stayed close ever since despite living in different cities for most of our 20s. He'd moved back to the area about 2 years ago, worked in insurance, and had the kind of grounded perspective I needed when my own head got too loud. He was the first person I'd told when I decided to propose. The first person I'd called when she said yes. We met at a coffee shop near his office. I told him everything that happened at the dinner. The outburst, the never planned to be a mother announcement, the way Caroline had looked at me like I was the problem. James listened without interrupting. When I finished, he took a long sip and set down his cup. That's rough, man. What are you thinking? I don't know yet. I'm still trying to figure out if this is a fight we can recover from, or if I'm just now seeing something that was always there. What does your gut say? I thought about it. Really thought. My gut says something changed, or maybe nothing changed and I just wasn't paying attention. James nodded slowly. Her sister was in town, right? The podcast one? Bailey. Yeah, for a week. And this started after that? I hadn't connected it that explicitly, but the timeline matched. Everything had shifted after Bailey's visit. I'm not saying it's definitely the sister, James said, but I've seen clips from that podcast. That woman could convince a fish to hate water. Just watch patterns. See what you see. Don't assume anything yet, but don't ignore anything either. It was good advice. Simple. The kind of thing that sounds obvious, but isn't when you're in the middle of it. We talked for another hour. Not about Caroline, about work, about his dating life, about the trip he was planning to Colorado next spring. Normal stuff. It felt good to have a conversation that wasn't loaded. When we split up, he put a hand on my shoulder. Whatever happens, you know where to find me. Anytime. Over the next few days, I took his advice. I watched. I paid attention to patterns I'd been too comfortable to notice before. The late-night phone calls Caroline took in the bathroom, with the fan running for noise. The way she'd minimize her browser the second I walked into the room. The shift in her vocabulary. Emotional labor. Centering my needs. Relationship audit. Performative commitment. Radical self-prioritization. She talked like she was reading from a script someone else had written. And the more I listened, the more I recognized the source material. Bailey's podcast had become Caroline's background noise. She played episodes in the car, in the kitchen while cooking, in the bedroom before sleep. Always loud enough for me to hear. Sometimes I wondered if that was intentional, like she was trying to educate me without having to do it directly. I started actually listening instead of tuning it out. One episode was about the myth of the good partner. Bailey argued that women were conditioned to feel grateful for men who did bare minimum things, held jobs, didn't cheat, showed up on time, when they should be demanding more. Stable isn't a virtue, she said. Stable is a starting point. If the best thing you can say about your partner is that he's reliable, You're settling. The next morning, Caroline made a comment about how I never surprised her anymore. When I asked what she meant, she shrugged and said she just felt like we'd gotten into a rut. We'd been together 3 years. We had routines. I thought routines were a sign of stability. Apparently, they were evidence of stagnation. Another episode featured Bailey interviewing a woman who'd left her fiancé 3 months before their wedding. The woman described her ex as perfectly nice and stable, but said she'd realized he was a placeholder while she figured out what she really wanted. She talked about him like he was a rental car she'd returned when she didn't need it anymore. The next day, Caroline came home from work and announced she wanted to revisit our division of household labor. We already split things close to evenly. I did dishes and trash. She did laundry and bathrooms. We alternated cooking, but apparently I wasn't doing enough invisible work. When I asked what invisible work meant, she couldn't give specifics, just said I should educate myself about emotional labor and stop expecting her to manage everything. I went back through our shared calendar that night. In the past month, I'd scheduled 3 things. She'd scheduled 2. I'd initiated planning for 5 date nights. She'd initiated 1. I wasn't sure what she was managing that I wasn't seeing. Another episode dropped. This one was about financial autonomy within partnerships. The thesis was that joint accounts were tools of control, that women should maintain complete financial independence, even within marriage. 2 days later, Caroline suggested we close our joint account and handle all expenses with separate Venmo payments. When I asked why fix something that wasn't broken, she said it was about maintaining independence. A few days later, she brought up the prenup we'd agreed to skip. Maybe we should reconsider, she said, just to protect both of us, just in case. I noticed she'd stopped wearing her engagement ring around the apartment. When I asked, she said it bothered her skin. She'd worn it daily for 8 months. Never mentioned discomfort once. Suddenly, it was irritating. The physical affection dropped off too. I'd reach for her hand watching TV. She'd find a reason to get up. I'd lean in for a kiss goodbye in the morning. She'd offer her cheek. I'd suggest date nights. She'd have other plans. Always with friends. Always vague about the details. The clearest moment came on a Thursday night. Caroline was on the phone with Bailey in the living room, not bothering to lower her voice. I was in the kitchen making dinner, clearly visible through the doorway. I know. You're right. I just need to figure out the logistics before I make any moves. It's complicated when you're this deep in. Pause. No, he doesn't suspect anything. He thinks we're fine. I'm just trying to get my ducks in a row before I blow up our lives. She laughed at something Bailey said. Yeah, I'll call you tomorrow. Love you too. She hung up, walked past me to the bedroom, and said she had a headache and was going to bed early. I stood in the kitchen for a long time after that. The pasta I'd been making went cold. She's already thinking about exit strategies. That's when I started seeing things for what they are, and started checking out. But the final nail in the coffin? Never saw that coming. At all. The discovery didn't come in one clean moment. It came in pieces, the way these things actually happen. The first piece was an accident. About a week after the dinner, I was working from home. Caroline was cooking and asked me to grab her iPad from the bedroom. She wanted to follow a recipe. I found it on the nightstand, picked it up, and the screen lit with a notification preview. Text from Bailey. Did you reschedule the follow-up appointment? They said 6 weeks post-procedure is standard for the check-in. I stared at the words for maybe 5 seconds before the screen went dark again. Post-procedure. Follow-up appointment. 6 weeks. I brought her the iPad without saying anything. She took it, glanced at the screen, and something flickered across her face before she smiled and said thanks. I didn't mention it, but I started doing math. The second piece came a few days later. Rosa was a mutual friend. She'd known Caroline since college. We'd been to her wedding last year. Had her and her husband over for dinner a few times. Good people. She texted me out of the blue asking if we could meet up. Said it was important. Said she'd been going back and forth about whether to say something. We met at a coffee shop near my work. She looked uncomfortable from the moment she sat down, fidgeting with her cup, not making eye contact. I don't know if I should be telling you this, she started, but I keep thinking about how I'd want someone to tell me. If our situations were reversed. Tell me what? She pulled out her phone, scrolled to a screenshot, turned it toward me. It was a group chat. Caroline, Bailey, and 2 other women I vaguely recognized from Caroline's college friend group. The messages were from about a month ago. Caroline. I know I should be more excited about the wedding, but honestly, I just feel trapped. Bailey. That's your gut telling you something. Listen to it. Caroline. Brian is great on paper. Stable. Reliable. But is that enough? I feel like I'm settling for the safe option. One of the others. Girl, you need to figure this out before the wedding, not after. Bailey. She's handling it. One thing at a time. First the appointment, then the rest. I read it twice. Settling. Safe option. handling it. The appointment. Rosa was watching my face. I'm sorry. I didn't know if you knew about any of this, but the appointment, there's been talk in the group. Bailey's been telling people that Caroline had a pregnancy scare last month and took care of it. I thought you should know. In case you didn't, I sat very still. Did Caroline tell you she was pregnant? I shook my head. Rosa's face crumpled with something like guilt, or pity, or both. I'm so sorry, Brian. I really am. The third piece was confirmation. That night, I didn't go digging through her private stuff. I didn't need to. Our insurance sends explanation of benefits letters sometimes. The boring, this is not a bill envelopes. There was one addressed to her in the mail tray that she hadn't opened yet. I stared at it for a minute, then opened it. Provider name, date of service, and a line item that made my stomach go cold. Pregnancy termination services, follow-up included. She'd been pregnant. She'd terminated the pregnancy. She'd never said a word to me about any of it. I sat on the couch until 2 a.m., not moving, not sleeping, just sitting there in the dark, processing. Her body, her choice. I believed that. Still do. If she'd come to me, told me she was pregnant, told me she didn't want to continue, we could have talked about it. It would have been hard, complicated. I would have had feelings about it, but I would have respected her decision. I would have been there for her. That's what partners do. But she didn't come to me. She hid it. Made the choice alone with Bailey coaching her through the logistics. Kept planning a wedding she was calling a trap in private. Let me put down deposits on a future she was actively dismantling behind my back. That was the betrayal. The secrecy. The lying. The 6 weeks of looking me in the eye every single day while hiding something that fundamental. While describing me to her friends as a safe option she was settling for. While treating me like a placeholder she could discard whenever something better came along. I didn't get angry. Anger would have been easier, honestly. Something to burn through. Burn. What I felt instead was cold, clear, certain. This woman was not who I thought she was. This relationship was not what I thought it was. And the future I'd been building for 3 years had been fiction the whole time. I didn't confront her that night. Didn't say a word. Just sat there in the dark until I heard her alarm go off in the morning. Then I got up, went to work like nothing had changed. But everything had changed, and I knew exactly what I needed to do next. I spent the next week quietly taking my life back, just handling what needed to be handled. The wedding vendors came first. I made a list, put them in order of complexity, and started working through it on lunch breaks. Calls from my car in the parking lot where nobody could hear. The venue was the biggest one, $5,000 down on a converted barn that Caroline had fallen in love with. I dialed the number, got the event coordinator, and explained. Hi, I need to cancel a booking for next October. Reservations under my name. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Can I ask the reason? Engagement ended. The coordinator's voice shifted from professional to sympathetic. I'm so sorry. Let me pull up your contract and see what we can do. We were inside the cancellation window, which meant technically they could keep everything. But she transferred me to the manager, a woman named Samantha. We don't like to keep people's money when their lives are falling apart, Samantha said. Let me see what I can work out. Hold music. 3 minutes. Then she came back. I can refund 3,000 of the 5. We've turned down other bookings for that date, so we have to keep something. But I want to help. Thank you. I appreciate that. And for what it's worth, I've been where you are. It does get better. The caterer was trickier. Their cancellation department was efficient, but firm. Wedding's off. Need to cancel. What's the refund situation? You're inside the penalty window. We can refund half the deposit minus a processing fee. 4,000 down, 2,000 back. Another $2,000 gone. That's fine. Confirmation will be in your email within the hour. I hope things work out. The photographer remembered me when I called. She'd had a calm energy at the consultation, asked good questions, seemed genuine. Brian, hi. How are preparations going? Actually, that's why I'm calling. Wedding's off. Silence. Then, are you okay? I appreciated that she asked about me first. I will be. Just need to get through the next few weeks. I can refund half your deposit given the circumstances. I've blocked off that date and turned down other bookings, so I can't do the full amount, but I want to help where I can. 2,500 down, 1,250 back, another 1,250 gone. The DJ was a friend of a friend. I caught him on his lunch break. I need to cancel the October date. Engagement ended. Ah, man, I'm sorry. I wanted to apologize for the inconvenience. Don't worry about it. October's far enough out. No charge, no hard feelings. Sometimes the weddings that don't happen are the lucky ones. Better to know now. 4 calls, maybe 2 hours total, 12,000 in deposits, recovering about 6.25. The price of learning a lesson I needed to learn. The apartment was simpler than I'd feared. Lease in my name alone. Caroline had moved in gradually, and we'd never updated paperwork. I called the landlord. confirmed I was staying, and asked about removing a roommate. 30 days written notice, send me an email with the date she'll be out. Our joint account had about $3,000. I pulled the statements, figured out what was mine versus hers, and transferred my portion back. Left her half untouched. I wasn't trying to win money. I was trying to get free. Changed streaming passwords, removed her from my phone plan, updated my emergency contacts at work. Small things, but the kind that could turn into headaches if you left them alone. The engagement ring was a question I had to think about. I looked up the law in our state. Conditional gift. Ownership got murky depending on who ended things and why. A lawyer would cost more than the ring was worth to fight over. I decided not to fight for it. $8,000. Call it tuition for a lesson I needed to learn. Throughout all of this, Caroline noticed nothing. She was absorbed in her phone, her podcast episodes, her text threads with Bailey. We existed in the same apartment like roommates who weren't particularly close. On Friday night, I got a text from an unknown number. Hey, this is Bailey. Caroline says you've been acting distant lately. I think we should talk. I'm in town this weekend. I didn't respond, but I knew she'd show up anyway. Content opportunities didn't knock twice. Saturday morning, clear skies. The first day of whatever came next. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, waited. Caroline shuffled out around 10:30, checking her phone before she even made eye contact with me. Bailey's coming over. Sister stuff. You mind giving us some space for a couple hours? Actually, I said, I need to talk to you about something. Bailey should probably hear it too. She looked up. Something flickered behind her eyes. What kind of something? Sit down, Caroline. She didn't move. You're scaring me. Sit down. She sat. Slowly. I took a breath. Kept my voice level. I know about the procedure. 6 weeks ago. I saw the notification on your iPad when you asked me to grab it. And an insurance EOB showed up after that. The color drained from her face. For a long moment, she didn't speak. You went through my stuff? No. The EOB came to the apartment. I didn't go hunting. It showed up. The buzzer went off. Bailey. Perfect timing. Let her up, I said. She should hear this. Caroline walked to the intercom like she was moving through water. A minute later, Bailey came through the door with a shoulder bag and her phone already in hand. Screen angled like she was ready to capture something. What's going on? Bailey looked between us. Caroline, you look pale. What did he do? She's fine, I said. We're having a conversation. You're welcome to stay, but put the phone away. I have every right to put the phone away. This isn't content. If you want to narrate your feelings later, knock yourself out. Not in my living room. Bailey hesitated. She lowered the phone with obvious reluctance. Fine, but I'm staying. Wouldn't have it any other way. I turned back to Caroline. Here's what's happening. I've canceled the wedding. All the vendors have been notified. The apartment is mine. Lease is in my name. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. The joint account has been split. Your half is untouched. Caroline's face cycled through shock, denial, confusion. Then the tears started. What? You can't just... We didn't even talk about... This isn't fair. We're talking now. She tried the first angle. The emotional appeal. Baby, I'm sorry. I should have told you. I was scared. I didn't know how you'd react. Everything happened so fast and Bailey was here and I panicked. Stop. I held up a hand. You weren't scared. You made a decision, hid it for 6 weeks, and kept planning a wedding you had no intention of going through with. While telling your friends I was a safe option you were settling for. She went white. How did you... Rosa. She showed me the group chat. Said I deserved to know what my fiancé actually thought of me. Caroline's eyes flicked to Bailey for a split second. Like she was checking the script, looking for the next line. That tiny moment told me everything I needed to know about who was running this show. Bailey stepped forward, already shifting into damage control mode. This is exactly the kind of reaction I warned her about. Controlling. Punitive. You can't end an engagement because she made a private medical decision. I'm not ending it over the decision. I'm ending it over the lies. The secrecy. The 6 weeks of looking me in the eye while hiding something that fundamental. The fact that she's been describing me to friends as a placeholder while I've been planning a future she was actively sabotaging. Bailey's face twitched. She hadn't expected me to have receipts. Caroline tried angle 2. Deflection and minimization. You're overreacting. This is one mistake, one secret. Couples get through worse than this. We can work on communication. We can go to therapy. With someone who's been describing me as a placeholder to her friends for months? No thanks. Caroline tried angle 3. Bargaining with promises. We can work through this. Couples therapy, individual therapy, a break while we figure things out. Whatever you need, Brian. I'll do whatever you want. I love you. You don't get to love someone you've been lying to for months. You don't get to call it mistakes when you had a whole support system helping you hide things. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is who you are. She shifted to angle 4. Righteous indignation. The tears stopped. You know what? Maybe I did settle. Maybe you're exactly as boring and controlling as Bailey said you were. Maybe I should have ended this months ago instead of trying to make it work. Maybe you should have, but you didn't. You stuck around while I paid for wedding deposits. While I planned a future, you were actively undermining. That's not settling, Caroline. That's using someone. The room went quiet for a moment. Angle 5. The threats. Her voice hardened. If you do this, I'll tell everyone what kind of person you are. I'll post about it everywhere. I'll make sure everyone knows you abandoned me over a medical decision. I looked at her for a long moment. Go ahead. Tell whatever story you want. Post whatever you want. I'll tell the truth. That I ended an engagement with someone who lied about fundamental things while planning a wedding she never intended to follow through with. People can decide for themselves. She had nothing left. The manipulation playbook was exhausted. The tears weren't working. The threats had bounced off. She just sat there, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. I stood up. The ring. Keep it. Sell it. I don't care. Consider it severance. Severance. Cheaper than a divorce would have been if I'd married you and found out all this 2 years from now. Consider it a mutual win. I grabbed my jacket, walked toward the door. I'm going out. When I get back, I'd appreciate if you'd started making arrangements. 30 days. I paused at the door, looked at Bailey. Great podcast, by the way. Bye. Really educational. You should do an episode about this one. Call it When Unshackling Goes Wrong. I'd tune in. Bailey's face went through about 5 expressions in 2 seconds. Behind her, Caroline was still sitting at the table, looking at nothing. Shell-shocked. The tears had failed. The threats had failed. And now she was sitting in an apartment she'd have to leave, facing a future that looked nothing like what she'd planned. I didn't feel sorry for her. I just felt done. Now here's what happened over the next few weeks. Caroline moved out 19 days later, crashed at Bailey's place in Austin for a few weeks, then got her own apartment back here. She tried reaching out twice, once to talk things through, once to ask if I'd reconsider. I didn't respond to either. Some doors close for a reason. As for Bailey, she did make an episode about it. Called it When Sisters Choose Themselves. Framed the whole thing as Caroline's awakening and me as the controlling ex who couldn't handle a woman with boundaries. Got about 200 comments. Most of them were women saying Caroline dodged a bullet. A few were guys saying I dodged a missile. I'll take those odds. Guys, we are so close to hit 100,000 subscribers on this channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. It really helps hit that 100,000 mark. Thanks for making